Hello and welcome. I'm Jack Fink and you're watching Eye on Politics on CBS News, Dallas-Fort Worth. This week we go one-on-one with the major candidates running for Texas governor. Republican Greg Abbott, the two-term incumbent, and his Democratic challenger, former El Paso Congressman Beto O'Rourke. We begin with O'Rourke, and we caught up with him after he campaigned in Cleburne in Johnson County. Why should Texans hire you as governor?
Our current governor has failed us. Can't fix the grid, can't keep the lights on, can't reduce the inflation that we're seeing in our property taxes and our utility bills, can't keep our kids safe in school. We're 11 weeks and counting from Uvalde, and he has yet to make a single change to protect kids or teachers for that matter. Unable to fix our education system that is losing teachers by the thousands. As you saw here today in Johnson County in Cleburne, Texas, we're bringing people together to fix these things, to make sure that we have a grid that's connected to ERCOT, that is fully winterized and weatherized. We're going to go after those illegal profits that were stolen from us and return it to the ratepayer. We're going to bring property taxes down by expanding Medicaid, ensuring everybody can see a doctor while also reducing the burden on homeowners and renters. And we're going to get behind those public school teachers and make sure they're paid enough not to work a second or third job, treated with the respect that keeps them in the classroom and keeps the focus on our kids. We do that and ensure that our rights are protected, like the rights of women to make their own decisions about their own body, the rights of Texans to marry the person of their choice. We're going to be back on the right track in this state. But a majority of our fellow Texans think we're on the wrong track today. The only way to fix that is to win this election.
I wanted to ask you about jobs and the economy in Texas. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas said recently that Texas will add nearly 600,000 jobs this year, and employment will reach 13.7 million this December. Companies, as you know, keep relocating to Texas, many of them to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. My question is, why should voters make a change in the middle of all this?
Imagine what we could do in terms of attracting employers or creating more jobs if we didn't have a total ban on abortion in Texas with no exception for rape or incest. It's really hard to attract and retain the talent when people feel under attack, or they feel attacked because their kid is trans, or because the legislature is introducing a Don't Say Gay bill. This politics of fear and hatred compromises the economic success that was built by businesses, entrepreneurs, and the workers within them. I also want to make sure that we have higher paid jobs. I just was listening to a school teacher here in Cleburne. She told me she's working 3 jobs this summer to be able to afford to be a teacher. Her average payment on her home has gone up $700 a month, and that's on top of every other inflation that she's seeing in her life right now. So higher paying jobs that add more value in our communities, that treat the people who work them with the respect that they deserve, that allows us to grow this economy even more and ensure that more people can do well and afford to just work 1 job instead of 2 or 3.
When you looked at a number of the recent polls here in Texas in the governor's race, it shows that Governor Abbott is leading by between 5 and 8 percentage points. What is your path to victory?
We've got to continue to bring Republicans, independents, and Democrats together. It's the only way to win, and it's the right way to govern. I don't want to deliver as governor for Democrats or independents or Republicans. I want to deliver for all of us. So building this coalition now in this campaign, we saw them here today in Johnson County. We saw them Sunday in Waxahachie. We're bringing people over who feel that Greg Abbott is too radical, too extreme, or just too incompetent on issues like the grid or his inability to reduce inflation. They want us to turn the page. For whatever reason, he is unwilling or unable to make the changes that we need. They're looking for someone who can. So that's the coalition that will win this election, but it's also the coalition that will ensure that we can get these big things done, whether it's attracting more employers and better paying jobs, improving our schools for our kids most importantly, but also the teachers who are leaving by the thousands, or doing common sense bipartisan things like expanding Medicaid or legalizing cannabis in this state. We only get that done when we bring everyone together. Too many years of division and polarization, time that we focus on community and bringing everybody to the table.
As you know, it's back to school. School security is top of mind for a lot of parents right now. And my colleagues recently interviewed some of the survivors back at Santa Fe High School, a substitute teacher who was shot and thankfully survived, a student who was shot and thankfully survived. And one thing that they told us was that the state laws that were passed by the legislature in 2019 didn't go far enough in making sure that there was teeth and that the school districts had to comply with these safety standards. If you're elected, what will you do to make sure that the school districts follow law and comply?
I'm going to listen to and follow the lead of those parents and educators and former students at Santa Fe High School, the parents and educators and students in Uvalde. They've told us what we need to do to keep kids safe going forward. Raise the minimum age of purchase, for example, of an AR-15 to at least 21 years old. Have a red flag law so that if someone is threatening to use a firearm they own against students in that classroom, that we intervene before it's too late. Implement a universal background check. We have one at gun stores today, but you can buy from a private seller without a background check. We do those things, we will be able to prevent more of these massacres and tragedies and get back to the common sense, responsible gun ownership that we've always had in the state of Texas. Greg Abbott has taken us off course through his fealty to the NRA, passing permitless carry over the objections of law enforcement, police chiefs, and sheriffs that now allows anyone to carry a loaded gun on our streets without any kind of background check, vetting, or training whatsoever, has predictably caused an increase in gun violence. And we now have more law enforcement who've been gunned down in the state of Texas than any other state in the union. So let's get back to defending the Second Amendment while protecting the lives of the people in our communities, especially our kids in school.
You will, if you're elected, you will likely have a Republican legislature. We've talked about this before, and so I'm wondering, how do you pass that? And if you can't, have you looked at other options?
I've listened to people across the state of Texas. I've spent the last 3 weeks in some of the most rural, Republican represented counties that there are in this state. And I've listened to gun owners and non-gun owners, Republicans and Democrats. We have common ground on a universal background check, on raising the minimum age of purchase, on a red flag law. In fact, as polled, the vast majority of Texans support those measures. We've just lacked a leader in office who can bring everyone together to the table, Republicans and Democrats, and hammer out the consensus, compromise where necessary if we have to, but do something better than what we have today. Those parents in Uvalde, 11 weeks after their kids were taken from them, are demanding action right now. And I want to make sure that we deliver for them and parents across the state who expect us to protect their kids in those classrooms.
When you talk about Uvalde, and I don't know if you had a chance to read the House investigative report, but there were problems with an unlocked door, a classroom door, the keys, there were questions over that. We saw the same thing at Santa Fe. And so that's why I want to go back to my question. How will you persuade Texans that if you were elected, that you will make sure that these school districts are following the law?
School districts have to make sure that their number one priority is the safety of those students, of those educators, of the support staff, those parents who are dropping off and picking up their kids each and every day. We've got to hold superintendents, trustees, principals, everyone involved accountable to make sure that that safety is to the greatest degree possible guaranteed. But if we do not complement that with reforms that address how easily an 18-year-old could walk into a gun store just outside of Uvalde and buy 2 AR-15s and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, that he could be sending so many signals to so many people that he intended to use that against others, that his friends called him the school shooter before he ever entered that school and shot anybody, then we'll be missing the greatest opportunity to save the greatest number of lives. So yes, it means strengthening the security at our schools, holding people accountable, improving our gun laws to protect the Second Amendment and protect the lives of our kids. And then the governor's talked about mental health. We're 51st in the nation in mental health care access today. The month before Uvalde, he took out $211 million from the state's mental health care budget. Let's fully fund mental health care in Texas as well. Let's do everything, in other words, to make sure that the only thing our kids are worried about is making sure they get their homework in on time, that they're able to rise to the top of their class and achieve to their heart's potential over the course of their lives, not worried about being gunned down in their own classrooms.
I wanted to ask you, I wanted to show you actually, a map that my colleagues came up with, and this is when talking about mental health and how much mental health services are available to students across the state. And green, which there's not much of, is adequate health care services. Blue is where there's telehealth programs. Red is where there's no access at all, and orange is where it's inadequate. And this came from state data that my colleagues put together as a map. When you see that map, what's your reaction?
That map reflects everything I've been hearing across the state. And one of those orange areas is in Lufkin, Texas, and we were just there. And I remember a woman raising her hand at a previous town hall and saying, my brother gets arrested on purpose to be taken to the county jail because he's uninsured, we haven't expanded Medicaid, and his schizophrenia untreated produces so much suffering, this is his only option. Today, in most of those counties, the #1 provider of mental health care services is the county jail system. If we just took yes for an answer and expanded Medicaid and brought in $10 billion of our own federal income taxes back to the state of Texas, we could provide access for mental health care in these underserved communities. We could supplement that with additional state spending and make sure that people are healthy enough and well enough to go to work, raise their families, finish their education. And we could also make sure that we save the taxpayer the cost of incarcerating somebody today who has no other option but to go to jail in order to get that help. It's the most economical, most effective, most efficient way to deliver those services, and it brings back $10 billion a year, which will also reduce our property taxes in Dallas County and every other one of the 253 counties in Texas.
I did have one other question. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
You talk about fixing the grid. You talk about people paying more for their electricity. My question to you is, how will you lower bills? And there hasn't been a determination yet that there was fraud. I know that the federal government is still looking into that. So how will you lower bills, and how specifically will you fix the grid?
Yeah, there's a state statute on the books that disallows price gouging in the time of a declared emergency or disaster like the one we had last February when Governor Abbott could not keep the lights on and the power running. He chose, it was his order to peg the price of electricity at its highest allowable rate. Gas began to trade at 200 times its going rate. Pipeline companies, energy traders made $11 billion in illegal profits. All of us are having to pay that back through higher utility bills right now. The only winner at the end of the day was Greg Abbott, who got millions of dollars from the people who made billions of dollars off of all of us. As governor, I'm going to go back and get those $11 billion and return them to the ratepayer to reduce our expenses. If necessary, we'll use some of the state surplus, some of the rainy day fund to reduce the burden of inflation in the state of Texas, including on our utility bills. And we're also going to invest in weatherizing buildings like this one, our homes and our schools, so that they're drawing down less power, reducing the bills that we're having to pay. We do that and fix the grid by weatherizing and winterizing every aspect of it, connecting ERCOT to the national grid, having an independent market monitor so that gas can't trade at 200 times its going rate again. And we're going to have a first world electricity grid, which is what we deserve as the greatest state in the greatest country on the planet.
Beto O'Rourke, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack.
We spoke with Governor Abbott after he held a campaign roundtable in Dallas. So why should Texans re-elect you to a third term?
Because under my tenure, Texas has been the land of economic opportunity. Since I was last re-elected, Texas ranks #1 for the most new jobs added by far over the past 4 years. We now have more Fortune 500 companies that call Texas home than any other state. Most importantly, more Texans have a job today than ever before in the history of our state. But listen, we know that not all businesses are large. Most businesses are small. 90% of all businesses are small. Texas ranks #1 in the country for the most number of small businesses. Aside from the economy and jobs, which Texas excels at better than any other, one thing about our economy is the fact is doing so well, we have a massive surplus of $27 billion. What I want to do with that $27 billion is to provide better health care, better education, but also use a bulk of it to provide the largest property tax cut in the history of our state. Those things said, we need to understand that there are some extraordinarily tough challenges we're dealing with today. One is the border. Remember, 2 years ago, we never had the challenges we're facing today on the border. 2 years ago, it was the lowest number of border crossings in decades. Today, under the Biden administration, we have the highest number of illegal immigration crossings ever. I'm the only candidate in this race who has done anything to secure the border. In fact, I've done more than any governor in American history to secure our border. Whereas my opponent, Beto O'Rourke, said there's no problem on the border. And he's said other things such as that he wanted to provide legal status to illegal immigrants who are coming into the United States. That would do nothing but attract more illegal immigration to our state. And then there's another enormous difference between where he and I stand on public safety. I signed a law last session to defund any city that defunds police. We've seen the chaos that's occurred across our country because of unsafe cities, New York, Chicago, Seattle, Portland, etc., where they have defunded the police and they paid the consequence. We saw Austin defund the police, and it led to the highest number of murders ever. And we said, not on our watch will we allow police to be defunded. Defunding the police is something that Beto O'Rourke came out and said that he loved the idea of what Black Lives Matter was doing to defund and dismantle police. We could not have that leftist agenda, by the way, a leftist agenda that is being supported and advanced by George Soros, who gave $1 million to Beto O'Rourke because George Soros agrees with what Beto agrees with, and that is open border policies and defunding the police. That is wrong for Texas, and I will fight against it.
Wanted to ask you, how well is the state government working? When you read the headlines across Texas, the Texas Juvenile Justice Division is not accepting new kids anymore because of staffing issues. They've implemented emergency protocols. The foster care system, a federal judge has threatened Texas with imposing significant fines. So what are you doing to answer that and to resolve these issues?
Well, when you run the state, of course, there are literally hundreds of different agencies and projects that we work on to make sure that the state is running well. Two of those agencies that you mentioned, I'll answer each of them. One is in the juvenile justice system. Listen, they are dealing with the same challenges that the private sector is dealing with, and that is the private sector across the board cannot get the employees that they need to do the job. And the same thing is happening in the public sector also. And in the juvenile justice system, they have an inadequate number of employees, and they are able to leave there and actually get a higher paying job in the private sector. And so what we had to do on an immediate basis was to provide and inject a pay raise so that we could retain the employees that we have and try to hire more. Now listen, with regard to the Department of Family and Protective Services, no governor has responded to help that agency more than I have. I'm the only governor in Texas history who made improving the foster care system an emergency item. We injected more funds than ever before, and we added more staff to be able to address the problems. We continue to address the problems as needed. There was a new strategy that was passed out of the legislature to make foster care homes more community-based. And we're in the process of working to implement that, hoping that it will lead to results. But Jack, a problem that we have in the foster care system, we don't have enough families and homes that are willing to take in these foster care kids. So one of the potential solutions to address that is to increase the rates that are paid to foster care parents to make it more attractive for them to take in our foster care kids.
School security, you issued a number of directives after Uvalde, including exterior door checks at schools and also interim, unannounced, random inspections for intruders. And so I'm wondering, why didn't this come out of the 2019 law that was passed? Why is this only being called for now?
Well, when you look at the laws that we passed in the past, there were school safety enhancements, which included things such as checking doors. And so and obviously that was one of the failures of what happened in Uvalde. So one of the directives was for all school districts across the entire state of Texas to go back and look at the standards that we passed and make sure that schools are complying with those standards, to make sure that when kids come back to school this month, those schools will be up to the safety standards that were previously set by the state. And then some of the other things that you mentioned, I'll add to those things. But the intruder inspection. So that was not an idea that anybody came up with. I learned that idea from a school superintendent in the aftermath of Uvalde. And that's when I issued that directive to do these random intruder inspections where someone who's not affiliated with the campus will attempt to enter into the campus. And the purpose of it is to see if there are open doors, but also to see how long it takes for someone to respond to it. That response time is critical. And then there are other things that we have offered up, such as we are expanding the iWatch Texas program. This is a program that you can use on your phone or your tablet or your laptop, whatever. You can report any type of suspicious behavior, like what was shown by the shooter in Uvalde. That should have been reported but was not reported. If it had been reported, it would have given law enforcement the ability to respond to that before that day even took place. You remember something that we all used to say: see something, say something. We need to get back to that. But then one last thing that we're doing, and that is a law that I passed provided enormous mental health care funding for students in schools. And it provides school counseling with parental consent for students that have mental challenges that can be addressed. And we've been able to address that for students in about 300 school districts across Texas. It had not made its way to Uvalde, unfortunately. One thing that we're working on is to make sure every school district in the state of Texas will benefit from this expansion of mental health care that we are providing to children in schools.
I did want to show you along that line, our staff, our producers, took a look at Texas school districts that have no mental health services. And I know it's a little difficult to see, but in green is the school districts that have adequate services for mental health. Red, they don't have any access. Orange, inadequate access. And blue is the telehealth. So when you look at that map, what goes through your mind? Because what Dr. Lakey told us was that some school districts weren't on board with this.
And so that's the point. But before I go to that point, let's clarify one other point. As Dr. Lakey probably told you about, we have a program called T-Chat. And what T-Chat does is it provides this mental health through telehealth. My point is very simply this, and that is every school district in the entire state of Texas has access to this program because every school district has access to telehealth. And so we can deliver this to every school district. There are some that are not buying into it. And so here's where we may need to go, and that is to impose greater accountability or consequences for schools that are not employing the best safety standards that can help the school. Let's go back to what these programs have revealed so far. They've identified a lot of kids, more than 1,000 children, that needed not only mental health assessment, but also treatment, and they were able to get that treatment, including some kids that had they not received treatment, it could have led to very dangerous situations. So we know that we've been able to de-escalate something because we have provided this program, and we need more schools and school districts to adopt this program that will provide mental health for children in schools across the entire state of Texas.
You've made headlines on the border as far as your war of words against the New York City Mayor Eric Adams. He said that he's going to send people down here to Texas to campaign against you. I think you were quoted as saying, "Make my day." In response, he said, "You are no Clint Eastwood," and he called you an anti-American governor and a global embarrassment. How do you respond to that?
Well, let's talk about globally for one. More businesses are choosing to locate in Texas because of our exceptionalism that we have in this state, including, by the way, businesses that are fleeing New York and coming to Texas. What is an embarrassment is this: it's the hypocrisy of the liberal elite in places like New York, Washington, D.C., and elsewhere, where they have self-declared themselves to be sanctuary cities. They have self-provided by their own governance free lodging and food for any illegal immigrant who comes to their community. And then when they finally get one, they're up in arms saying we shouldn't have to be doing this. They're nothing but hypocrites, and we called them on it. And now they've been caught on it, and they're embarrassed because they are not living up to the standards they themselves set. But also, now for the first time, it's not just the Texas border that's having to deal with the consequence of Joe Biden's open border policies. Now New Yorkers and people in Washington, D.C. are having to deal with it, and as a result of that, Americans across the country are seeing the results of what is really happening on the border. There were so many networks in this country, so many newspapers in this country that were not reporting on the chaos on the border caused by Joe Biden, that now for the first time, their audiences are getting to see, hold on, there is chaos on the border, and that chaos has come to New York. Now we finally got their attention.
But isn't this a job for Congress to tackle?
100%.
And so
Yeah,
what are you doing to, have you reached out to the Texas delegation, Senator Cruz, Senator Cornyn, all the Republicans in Congress, all the Democrats in Congress, and said, hey, we need to figure this out?
Right. So listen, if you look at Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, it delegates specifically to Congress the responsibility to deal with immigration. And Congress has failed at this, except in this regard. Congress has passed laws regulating the immigration process that the Biden administration is not enforcing. The Biden administration inherited one of the most secure borders ever in our history. And all he had to do was to continue the programs that he inherited. Instead, he dismantled all of those programs. And now we're dealing with this chaos. Yes, if Congress were to step up and do their job under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution and pass laws that made our border more secure, that would change things. But in Texas, we don't have time for that. And that's why I deployed the National Guard to secure the border. That's why I've deployed the Texas Department of Public Safety to arrest people who are coming across the border. That's why Texas is the only state in the history of the country, from George Washington to George Biden, only Texas has built its own border wall. And now Texas is sharing our pain with the rest of the country that has a responsibility to go through that pain themselves, so that all of America will make clear to leaders in Washington, D.C., the time is now to step up and fulfill their job and pass laws and execute those laws to secure our border.
Governor Greg Abbott, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack.
As we head into the fall, the state party chairs hope to lead their respective parties to victory. So how will they do that, and what issues are most important to their voters? We begin with Democratic Party Chair Gilberto Hinojosa and what he believes is their path to victory.
Essentially, what it always has been is we need to get our base out. There's no question that we have a great set of candidates running for statewide office, starting with Beto O'Rourke. And there's also no question that every election cycle we've been gaining in terms of our share of the vote statewide. If you look at what is the base of the Texas Democratic Party, our numbers far outweigh our numbers are far greater than what the Republican Party numbers are. However, we always have turnout issues. And so our job this election cycle is to get our base out and work as hard as we can to do that at every part of the state, whether it's the urban areas, suburban areas, the rural areas, particularly in South Texas, where, we have a large Democratic Party base of voters that we have struggled in the past to get out to go out and vote. And we're going to be working on that this election cycle, particularly because we've got 3 congressional races that the Republicans have targeted that we need to ensure that our voters come out and elect the Democratic candidates for all 3 of those positions.
Historically, the party that is in power in the White House loses seats in Congress in the midterms, and it's a challenge. And so I'm wondering, given that historical reality, how much more challenging is it this year for Democrats in Texas to win statewide and to win in those congressional races?
I mean, I don't know that it's any more challenging. We have, I believe, this election cycle the opportunity to do very well, particularly because of the momentum that Beto O'Rourke has right now in his race for governor, and particularly also because of the serious mistakes that have been made by Greg Abbott and the rest of the state leadership in a whole bunch of different categories. For starting from what happened with the pandemic and how Greg Abbott dropped the ball during the pandemic and thousands of people died. His refusal to expand Medicaid, his refusal to fix the grid, and we had hundreds of people die as a result of that. And he still hasn't fixed the grid. We're still having power outages all across the state of Texas. His reaction to the gun violence in the state, instead of trying to protect our children, he pursued just completely eliminating any restrictions on gun ownership without even having to get a license anymore in the state of Texas, and children are dying like they did in Uvalde. And then the mistakes that he made, for example, his little showmanship that he's engaged in on immigration issues, that where he started inspecting every vehicle coming into the country and caused this huge bottleneck on the border, costing Texans businesses billions of dollars, and even worse, because a lot of those people are now transporting their goods through New Mexico and losing further in Texas. So all these problems that have occurred as a result of the failed leadership of the Republican Party in the state of Texas, I think has put us in a good position of being able to pick up seats statewide. And it helps us also in our congressional races across the state of Texas. Mr. Biden's numbers might be low, but if you look at the margins between Beto and Abbott, he's closing almost every day on Mr. Abbott, and I think that the amount of work that he's putting into the excitement among the Democratic activists across the state of Texas, I think puts us in a good position of doing well this election cycle.
I was going to ask you about the fact that President Biden's poll numbers are very low. They're in the high 30s when you look at a whole bunch of the national polls, and his popularity, according to the polls, is even lower here in Texas. So I'm just wondering how much of a challenge is that when you don't have a popular president to help you campaign?
Well, I don't know that. I think I've mentioned earlier, I think that people are looking at this election locally to see what affects them personally. I mean, when you have a situation in Texas where we have a statewide leadership that allows all these terrible things to happen to the folks down here, they get angry at the people who are in the leadership in the state. I mean, look at the utility bills that people are paying today. A huge increase in utility payments that people are having to make on a monthly basis. Why? Because Greg Abbott allowed the power companies and the utility companies to pass all their expenses over to the consumers in this state, and people are angry about that. I mean, people are getting bills, electrical bills or utility bills that 30% above what they've ever paid before. In some instances twice. They're not blaming this on Joe Biden. They're blaming this specifically on Greg Abbott. And so I believe that the unpopularity of this governor is probably because of the way it directly affects the voters in the state, is probably having more of an effect on people's attitudes in the state than what Joe Biden's polling numbers are.
So what? I'm sorry. What are the Democrats? What is the message to Texas Democrats? What is your overall message on how you're going to try to attract voters?
Our overall message is to start early, start strong. Hit your base hard to make sure that you're getting them out to vote. Talk to low propensity voters, make sure that we get as many people to go out and vote. If our folks come out, given the margins that we've seen, in 2018, Beto lost by 215,000 votes statewide against an incumbent United States senator who was flushed with money. We've registered over 1 million people since 2018. So our numbers are there to be able to win this election statewide. If you look at the trajectory of Democratic voter turnout and the margins between Republicans and Democrats in the last 3 election cycles, we've closed that margin substantially. And so it comes down to whether or not these people that we've been registered, these people that are moving into the state of Texas that are also registering, that are not Republican voters, if they go out and vote in November, and if we continue to work hard like Beto has pushed us all to work, we can win this election. It's a turnout issue, and that's it. It's at the end of the day, if our base turns out this election cycle, Greg Abbott will be the next governor. Mike Collier will be the next lieutenant governor. Rochelle Garza will be the next attorney general. And so we just have a lot of work to do between now and the election. There is no silver bullet here. It's just a question of getting our base out, and that's what we're working to put together our campaigns directed towards increasing our base turnout.
How motivated are Democrats to get out and vote in November?
I was in Rockdale Friday night, which is a small community of 5,000 people, and Beto O'Rourke was there. We were in a theater that was packed to the point where there was not only no sitting places for people to sit, there was no places for people to stand up. And the people that were here covered the spectrum of the demographics of the state of Texas from every category, and they were excited, they were motivated, they were ready to get out there and do the work necessary to elect Beto O'Rourke and the rest of the ticket. I've been in politics for a long time, and the enthusiasm level that I saw in 2018 that almost got Beto elected and got us to pick up 12 state house seats in the state for the state legislature. That level of enthusiasm and fever among the Democratic activists is there today, and even greater. And so as long as we continue to work that way, we're 3 months out. I saw this in Beto's campaign in 2018, 30 days out. This is 3 months out, and he's continuing to grow in support across the state of Texas, and everywhere we're seeing that this kind of enthusiasm is present. Whether in Amarillo, where I saw another rally with another 400 or 500 people with Beto, as well, to Rockdale, Texas, to Houston, Texas. He's bringing these huge crowds out, and that's helping all the local candidates as well, because the turnout for him affects the turnout for everybody. And at the end of the day, as long as we continue to organize, I believe we can get there this election cycle, no matter what Joe Biden's numbers are looking like.
And as far as Tarrant County is concerned, that's the largest county that's still mostly Republican. And so how important is Tarrant County to bet not only Beto O'Rourke, but your other statewide candidates in winning in the fall?
Extremely important. It's the largest county in the state of Texas. It's not completely blue, but certainly it's purple. In the last two election cycles, Democrats have won countywide. Beto won Tarrant County in 2018. Joe Biden won Tarrant County in 2020. We've picked up state house seats in Tarrant County in the past, and we've got other state house seats also targeted as well. So, we have been growing in terms of our performance in Tarrant County substantially every election cycle. We have a great county judges race going there with Deborah People being the nominee. We've got people running for the house seats that are highly qualified as well. I think we have a chance of picking up another county commissioner seat as well. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm and activism going on right now in Tarrant County. I believe we will do well. We will. I'm fairly certain that Beto will win countywide in Tarrant County, and I'm fairly certain that Deborah Peoples will be the first African American county judge in the history of Tarrant County as well. So we're very excited about Tarrant County in the selection cycle.
I wanted to ask you about the issues that are driving Democrats. What do you think is driving them, and what impact will abortion have on the vote in November?
I believe it'll have a significant impact. I think that a lot of people in this state who are kind of the silent majority on this issue are going to come out. They're really upset about the fact that the Republican leadership of this state has decided that they're going to deprive people of their freedoms, the freedom as to what to do with their body. This is a party that brags about being all about freedom. Well, it's only about freedom as long as they're allowed to impose their agenda upon other human beings. I mean, they're trying to deprive women the freedom to make a decision regarding their healthcare needs, their reproductive rights. They're trying to deprive teachers the freedom to be able to teach whatever is within the curriculum that's been accepted for a long time. They're trying to deprive students from reading books that they want to read, that are books that are acknowledged to be among the best that have been written. They're stepping in to deprive people of their freedom to marry whomever they want to marry, and people are getting tired of the Republican Party out there trying to deprive people of their freedoms. And so I think when you look at all these factors together, you see that a lot of people in the state are just tired of this. I mean, and they're going to show their frustration. I mean, we've got 3 Supreme Court races on the ballot right now. You can take a look at the Texas Constitution, which is one of the most liberal constitutions in the United States. It was written by populists in the 1920s or somewhere around there, and it has a right to privacy in that, a specific right to privacy in the Texas Constitution. I would think that fair-minded judges looking at that would find that right to privacy would also extend to the right to have a woman decide to determine her bodily autonomy. And so this issue, I think, we don't have referendums, but in Texas, you can have a referendum in a sense by electing judges that are going to support a woman's right to determine her bodily autonomy. And so, it's going to be a big issue this election cycle. And I believe, people are going to vote what their own interest is in this area, and that their interest clearly is that they have the freedom to do what they should be allowed to do when it comes to their own healthcare needs and their right to bodily autonomy. So that's just an additional factor that is creating concern. I mean, teachers in the state are really angry at Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott. One, they're not getting paid what they deserve to get paid, and two, these people are stepping in to try to tell them that they can't assign award-winning books just because some far right-wing group of people have decided that book is not appropriate for school children. So you have that whole group of people who in the past have shown that they can have enormous influence on an election, that are angry, and they're going to show their anger at the polling places this election. So there's a lot of factors working, I think, to the benefit of Democrats. This whole issue of healthcare. I mean, people are beginning to learn now that Greg Abbott has been sitting on $10 billion a year of money through the Affordable Care Act that would expand Medicaid to give almost 1 million people access to health care, and without any reason whatsoever, other than just philosophically he doesn't believe in it. And people are dying as a result of that. A lot of them died at the time of the pandemic because did not have access to health care. These are issues that people are waking up to and saying, well, why are you doing this? Why are you working for yourself as opposed to the people of the state of Texas? When it came to fixing the grid, what did he do? He didn't do anything, but he held out his hand and they gave him $1 million because he didn't do anything. When it came to trying to do something about the children that are getting murdered in our schools by people with AR-15s, what does he do on the day that the children get massacred at Wilder? He has a fundraiser. He even appears virtually before the NRA. That was in Houston. Ted Cruz appears in person before the NRA. So, these people they only care not about the people, but they care about who's giving them money and who's supporting them. Their allegiances are not to the people that they were elected to represent, but their allegiances are to the donors that are giving them large sums of money. As you saw in that CNN special, 2 billionaires in the state of Texas have been buying basically the legislature and the statewide officials in the state for a long time. And I think people are listening and they're saying, we're tired of this. And they're looking at the alternative. And our alternative is we've got fair-minded, strong, intelligent, people like Beto O'Rourke and Mike Collier who have plans to help people in the state of Texas instead of plans to figure out how they can best pad the wallets of their donors.
Let me ask you, you mentioned before the races in South Texas, the 3 congressional races, and a variety of firms that look at races say that it's going to be close. These races are going to be close, and one of them even tilts towards the Republicans. So how concerned are you that you could lose all 3?
We're not concerned that we can lose all 3. We're concerned about making sure that our 3 get elected. We feel very confident that all 3 Democratic nominees, 2 of which are sitting congressmen, will win those elections. But we want to make sure that we do all that is necessary to be able to bring out our base on all 3 of those congressional districts. Because these people are shameless. I mean, let me give you an example of how bad they are. Myra Flores, a woman that was elected in that special election after spending in 6 weeks $3 million by dark money given to her by the Republican Party, went out and criticized the legislation that was passed by the Democrats right after Joe Biden took office to help people get through the pandemic. She said it was a waste of taxpayers' money. Part of that money just came down to Harlingen from a grant from the Biden administration. She has the audacity and the hypocrisy to get up and say, I brought you this money, when she was opposed to it as a candidate for Congress. This is the kind of hypocrisy. People down in South Texas, they're not stupid. They know who are with them and who are not with them. And they knew that this woman is not with them. And they're going to come back and they're going to punish people like her. The same thing happens with all the Republicans that are running on the Republican side for Congress. They're just, they make statements that they don't think that are not going to catch up to them. And now they're catching up to them. And I think you're going to see that people are going to punish them when it comes to time to voting. So yeah, we're always concerned that they're putting a lot of money down here, but at the same time, when they put money, that causes the National Party to put money down here as well. I mean, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee has opened up offices in Harlingen. They're opening up another office that's for the 15th. They're opening up an office on the 28th, on the the 28th congressional district as well, and they're putting money into also the 34th, which is Vicente Gonzalez's district. So this is something that we've never seen before, where the national party comes into South Texas and starts investing, along with the state Democratic Party and the local party. So we're going to work it hard. We're fairly certain we're going to win, but we're not going to take anything for granted.
Gilberto Hinojosa, chair of the Texas Democratic Party, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Now my conversation with Republican Party Chair Matt Rinaldi and how he believes Republicans will win this fall.
Well, I think the path forward, first of all, I think we're in a great position since we've won every statewide office in the state of Texas since 1994. I do think that's the longest streak nationwide, and we plan to continue it, certainly with an unpopular president such as Joe Biden. This is going to be a wave election nationwide. I think you're going to see the effects of that in Texas as well, which was already reliably Republican. The trick's going to be, we got to put in the work and do the ground game necessary to take Joe Biden's dismal approval ratings in the 30s and translate them to the generic party ballot. It's early. It's not usual that would be transferred, but what we need to do is make the case. People don't like Joe Biden. We need to make the case that Republicans are the alternative.
Are Republicans motivated to vote in November?
A lot more motivated after last night. I can tell you that. Yes, they're very motivated. The Biden administration's been an unmitigated disaster. They've been not only destroying our economy, opening our border, attacking our parents, targeting our schools, and as we saw last night, weaponizing the DOJ against political opponents. But Republicans are concerned that they're losing their country. They see it. They see it more than ever before after the FBI did a late night raid of Donald Trump's home. And they want to save it. They want to save the America that they grew up in, that they love. They want to save the strong economy that gave their family jobs. And they see that the Republicans are the only option to do that.
Why do you believe the FBI's executing a search warrant at former President Donald Trump's home in Florida is such a motivating factor?
Because Americans love their country because it's something different than the third world republics where every new leader jails their predecessor. We're not Cuba. We're not some Latin American third world republic. We're the United States of America, and we have the rule of law in this country. And Americans are rightfully repulsed by what happened at Donald Trump's home last night.
And do you believe that this is an effort to keep him off the ballot, keep him from running in 2024?
It might be. I'm not going to speculate as to motives, but it seems like, considering they were targeting archives, it might be under a federal law that is blatantly unconstitutional and can't keep him from running in 2024 anyway. But regardless of what the motive was, unless they have clear evidence, something of a significant crime, they should not have been executing a search warrant in his home in the dead of night last night.
I wanted to get back to the Texas governor's race. Given inflation, given the slowing economy, given the border situation, given President Biden's low poll numbers, why do you believe the governor's race is showing Governor Abbott with a 5 to 8 percentage point gap? Why do you think it's so close?
I think I do think that's a little bit low. I think it has a lot to do with the areas where Republicans are making the biggest gains, like at the border, is also where Beto has his strongest base. So I think it's just an in the weeds political reason. I do think it's going to be I think it's going to be a double-digit win or high single digits. I think it's going to be an easy win for every statewide official in the state of Texas. I think you'll see that lead grow closer to the election. as it does every election. The August polling always shows the closest races, and then as you get closer, it'll pull away, because Americans are fed up with inflation. They're fed up with an open border. We see gains in the Valley, which are absolutely unprecedented. I mean, Cameron County went Republican in the Myra Flores race after being 30 points Democrat in 2018. We see Starr County, that had 15 Republican voters in 2018 in the primary, this year have 1,800 Republican voters. So we're seeing huge monumental shifts in the working class, the Hispanic vote, the South Texas vote. And we expect that to reflect itself in the final numbers with a pretty significant victory on Election Day.
And what's your prediction for those 3 congressional races in South Texas?
I think we're going to win all 3 of them. I think the one that was previously in doubt was Congresswoman Flores's district. However, she has established herself as a fighter and a great representative for a district. She's an extremely popular representative. So I think the incumbency advantage for Congresswoman Flores is going to be even stronger than it would be for any other congressman. So we think Myra Flores is going to win, and we think we're going to take the other 2 as well, with Cassie Garcia and Monica De La Cruz.
How do you ensure that you're not getting that, people aren't getting ahead of themselves? And so the predictions may be there, you feel good about it, but then the stark reality comes that it didn't happen.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand the question.
In other words, how do you ensure that you feel good about those races, that you actually go out and win it? In other words, people feel good about it, but then they don't show up at the polls.
Well, I mean, that's the problem, right? Complacency in a year that's expected to be a big election for Republicans. And Republicans think it's a given. We're going to win this election. It's not a given. The poll, as you mentioned, the polls are closer than you would think in a year like this. And if we sit on our laurels, we're going to lose. So we need to go out, we need to do the work, we need to make the case that Biden represents all Democrats and make sure that his unpopularity translates to the generic ballot. And we're doing that work, by the way, between the Republican Party of Texas and the Governor Abbott campaign. We've hit over 2.3 million voters combined in the state of Texas, including calls, including block walking. We have an unprecedented election integrity effort where we're trying to get eyes on every ballot in urban areas in Harris County and in the Valley. So we're not taking it for granted, which is why I think it's going to translate to a big Republican victory.
What did you make at CPAC last week? The Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, warned conservatives there that this is not going to be an easy election. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. And I think he was referring to what we've discussed here, that, the polling in the state of Texas in a wave election year right now is still in the single digits. It's not a given that we're going to win this. I think we will ultimately, because we're going to put in the work. We're not going to take it for granted. And we're going to block walk. We're going to call. We're going to register voters. And we're going to make sure that this election, we get the highest percentage of the vote count that we possibly can. But I think what the Lieutenant Governor is saying is you can't just sit back at home and take it for granted. We got to put the work in, and we will.
And the Lieutenant Governor also told conservatives that the primaries are over with and that people have to unite behind the party. And my question is the party behind Governor Abbott? Is the party behind the Lieutenant Governor? Is the party behind Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, given the very divisive primaries that there were?
Yeah, we are 100% behind Governor Abbott. We are 100% behind Lieutenant Governor Patrick. We're 100% behind the rest of our statewide officials. I have actually never seen Republicans more united going into a general election than this year. We usually have the convention before each midterm election. And, the convention's usually divided. You usually see factions grow. But we didn't have that this year. We didn't have a chair election for the first time in a decade. The platform votes, the other votes were close to unanimous. People were fairly united behind all of our statewide officials going into the election, regardless of who they supported in the primary. And I think that'll translate to more votes.
And I wanted to ask you about the importance of Tarrant County. As you know, in 2018, Beto O'Rourke won the county when he ran for Senate. In 2020, Joe Biden won for president there. And then this year you have obviously O'Rourke on the ballot, and you have a big county judges race as well there. And so I'm wondering, how important is Tarrant County, and how concerned are you that O'Rourke could win Tarrant County, and what would that mean for your down ballot races?
Tarrant County is a bellwether, as you mentioned, kind of like Ohio and Florida used to be before they went solidly red. It's a bellwether. Technically, when Joe Biden won Tarrant County or Beto O'Rourke, it was a sign of other things down ballot, which is why it's so important. But I think Tarrant County appears to be going red this year. And I think County Judge Tim O'Hare is one of the best candidates we have on the, or County Judge candidate Tim O'Hare is one of the best candidates we have on the ballot statewide. I think we have other great candidates on the ballot there, like Andy Wen for county commissioner. And I think that'll drive turnout and enthusiasm among Republicans. And I think we're going to have a big victory there.
Is the state party helping in any way make sure that Tarrant County stays Republican?
Yes. We have a ground game that's hitting statewide and targeting certain areas. Tarrant County is the Tarrant County local races, county judge races, county commissioner races are one of our targets, and we'll be focusing there.
A couple more questions, and I appreciate your time. When we polled, and some other organizations have taken polls here, aside from the governor's race, one topic obviously that has come up after Uvalde is gun restrictions. Mm-hmm. And the polls show that there is a majority, including Republicans, favored expanding background checks as it relates to gun sales, even raising the age for buying certain firearms like AR-15 style weapons, and also red flag laws, even though there was less Republican support for that. And so I'm wondering for you, is that something that Republicans are really looking at? What do you make of that? And, just talk to me a little bit, because I know that since Senator Cornyn led the effort on that bipartisan bill in Washington, as far as some of the restrictions there, even though it wasn't included, the guns really weren't included all that much, this was something that he has really taken a lot of heat for. Being booed at the party convention, being censured by a variety of county parties. And so I'm wondering what your take is on where Republicans are with gun restrictions.
Well, I think you could see where Republicans are by the reaction to Senator Cornyn's bipartisan gun bill in the U.S. Senate. At the convention, in the straw poll, he registered 16% approval. In statewide polls, obviously that's a small sample at the convention. In statewide polls, he had the lowest approval of any statewide official after the bill went through, and has been polling under many potential rivals in the next primary. So it's had tremendously negative effects, because those polls that you cite are simply not accurate. When you educate the voters in those polls and let them know what background checks are currently required under law and what the state of the current law is, they have tremendously different results. Texans are committed to our Second Amendment right to bear arms now more than ever, since they can't count on the federal government and on law enforcement sometimes to defend themselves and their family. So we are committed to no infringements on our Second Amendment right to bear arms, and remain so.
I wanted to also ask you about the abortion vote in Kansas last week. What did you make of that, where obviously Kansas is a red state and the effort to change the state constitution to put restrictions on abortion did not pass? And so I'm wondering, A, what do you make of that? But B, do you think abortion is a wild card issue even here in the state of Texas, given the fact that the new state law takes effect August 25th and bans most abortions except to save the life of the mother?
No, I don't think it's going to be a wild card issue, because since the Dobbs ruling came down and every Texan was aware that the Texas trigger law would come into effect, the generic ballots actually increased in terms of Republican advantage, and Joe Biden's approval rating's gone down further. It just hasn't translated to voter enthusiasm on the side of the Democrats that's going to turn an election on to their favor. As far as the Kansas vote goes, I was surprised at it until I read the ballot language, and I'm an attorney, and I read the thing 3 times and I still couldn't figure it out. I can't imagine how anybody voting in the Kansas election, unless there was a tremendous voter education project on the pro-life side, could have figured out that ballot language. So I don't know. It's interesting, but I don't think it tells you anything about where public opinion is on the issue because of the confusing and convoluted ballot language. If you remember, Louisiana had some very clear ballot language a couple of years ago, and the voters in a state with a Democratic governor actually supported the pro-life side in a referendum.
So you're not at all concerned by the potential of abortion motivating Democrats here in Texas to get out and possibly score some victories?
No, I think it would motivate Democrat voters that are already motivated. And I think the polling that was done in May after the Dobbs leak for CNN showed that among those who were motivated by the Dobbs decision and abortion restrictions, the pro-life side was far more motivated to come out and vote. So it actually benefited our side over the pro-abortion side.
And then just wrapping up, wanted to ask you about CPAC, the straw poll results, obviously showing former President Trump with a sizable lead, 69%, which is very similar to what he scored last year at CPAC Dallas. So my question is, do you think he's running in November? And if he does that pretty much sideline everybody else?
I don't know. I don't know if he's running or not. He's given some indications that he would. I think whether he was running or not, it would certainly benefit him and his influence to give signals that he is going to run. I think at this point he would have obviously the leg up if he got in the race. He would be favored, although I think Ron DeSantis, whether or not he gets in, would be also in a strong position. In the end, depending on who decides to run, who doesn't, and how it plays out, I think it's one of 2 people as our nominee. It's either going to be Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis in 2024.
And what's the hesitation, do you think, for you about whether Trump is going to run?
I just don't know. I mean, because he hasn't announced it yet.
Right, but I mean, some people say, oh, well, he's definitely running. He's raising a lot of money. He's giving speeches. He's everywhere. And then there are those who say, I'm not so sure. Do you have any hesitancy about why he may not run?
No, I just don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know what he's thinking. And it would behoove him to stay in the public eye and to indicate that he was running anyway. I think whether he runs or not, Donald Trump will have a huge influence over the election, over this party for many years to come, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
All right, we will leave it there. Matt Rinaldi, chair of the Texas Republican Party. Thank you as always. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's Eye on Politics for this week. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jack Fink. You're watching CBS News, Dallas-Fort Worth.